Mike, welcome to the podcast. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. We were just saying that it's the first time back in the studio for a little while, so it was nice to be back in the home studio after Austin. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Yay, awesome. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. So it's good to chat to you. Obviously, you're a BJJ black belt, and you're the founder of the social media platform BJJ After 40.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know if I got this right, but I just mentioned to you that I think you created that platform, or started it at least, when you were about my age at 42. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's actually exactly right. That was, when I was 42 is when it all started.
Nice. So it's a very good time for me to be chatting to you then, is what we're thinking.
That's when I got my black belt. So yeah, it was about that time, right around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. So for potentially the slightly younger of our audience, and maybe for Danny's benefit as well, being a slightly younger gentleman, but tell us a little bit about what that platform is, and what sort of topics it covers besides the obvious, and how you came to start it.
So I started it really just kind of like, at first it was more just a place for people to connect that were over 40. This is going back a few years now. It's been around for a minute now. But and that's really kind of what it is too. It's a global community of fellow practitioners. We have a private Facebook group. We're up to about almost 70,000 followers now, which is mind blowing to me. It's like, I can't even believe there's that many people that are over 40, 50 and beyond that are even doing jiu-jitsu. But there's a huge mass of people now that are over 40. And just like Danny's 35, he's going to be 40 in 5 years. You just turned 42, and the clock just keeps on ticking. I'll be 56 this week, and it's hard to believe that that time goes by that quickly, but it does. And you want to set the groundwork now for what it's going to be like to be doing jiu-jitsu at 42, at 40 years old, at 50 years old, and beyond. Because if you ask anybody who practices jiu-jitsu that's serious about it, everyone shares the same sentiment. We all say that we want to die on the mats. I want to be Elio Gracie. I want to be 90 years old in a gi, dying on the mats. But you got to make it to 40 first, and you got to make it to 45. And so that's really the crux of what the BJJ After 40 group is about, is a place for people to connect. So within our group, people pop on there and they ask a lot of questions about recovery. And so that's something we talk about. What does sustainability look like at 40? What does it look like at 50? What does it look like at 60? How do we recover our joints? All of that stuff are things that we talk about within that platform.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. And completely agree. I think the idea of longevity in jiu-jitsu is definitely a wish for most people. And I guess when we think about, your 40-year-old jiu-jitsu enthusiast, you've kind of got maybe potentially three groups within that sort of demographic, where you've got maybe your hobbyists that have been training for a while, that are coming into maybe that age now, and I've got some niggles. That's probably me. Then you've maybe got your 40 plus year old competitors. That's definitely not me, but certainly a group. And then you've got people that are actually starting for the first time in their 40s.
Right.
So do you have a lens on the types of 40-year-old jiu-jitsu enthusiasts that you tend to see across your platforms, or is it a mixture of all of those?
It's a little bit of all of that. I mean, there's definitely a lot of guys and girls that are over 40 now that are competing. And then you have a lot of hobbyists and a lot of people just starting now at 40, 50. I've got two guys that train with me in their mid 60s, and they're in here doing open mat. They're in it's kind of crazy. I'll be in here last Thursday, I'm rolling 7-8 rounds and I'm dying. I'm watching the 65-year-old rolling every freaking round, dude. You know what I mean? So to me, that's very inspiring and very motivating, but there also has to be the appropriate path for someone who's starting that is, 50 years old or they're 40 years old. Maybe they're overweight, they're 30 pounds overweight, they're inflexible, their joints might be a little messed up. They played football back in high school, or they wrestled, 30 years ago. So you have to kind of consider all of those moving parts for that person. Otherwise, they end up getting hurt. They roll with some 20-year-old and they get their neck jacked or something, or their back, or they end up with a surgery. And that's not the path for anyone. No one starts jiu-jitsu thinking yeah, I'll be okay doing it. Even if I have 2 or 3 surgeries, I'm fine with that. Nobody should be fine with that. That's not the purpose of this. So I think you have to kind of consider all of that as a 40, 50 plus practitioner.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you, of course, will have a complete mixture of schools and academies and coaches that people will run into as well. And some, might be run by these young phenoms that are 20, 22, black belts that have been grappling since they were 5 and have got, still kind of bendy, flexible bodies. And then others will get, you'll have an old school or an older coach. And obviously the type of session you get as a result of that might sort of change as well.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And you have to think about that too. So if you're, I'm going to be 56 this year. And if I was a 56-year-old white belt and I'm getting advice from a 20-year-old black belt, that guy doesn't really know what it means to be a 50-plus practitioner at all and has no idea. So you have to be really, mindful from your perspective as a new student to do your due diligence and find out what is going to be, and plugging into a group like BJJ After 40 so that you're talking to other people. Even if they're not in your academy, you can at least hear the stories and see what other people are posting. One of the most heartbreaking things about starting like the BJJ After 40 group was like seeing all these dudes getting surgeries all the time and seeing people getting hurt. And you're like, fuck, dude, I don't want people to start jiu-jitsu and get messed up and get hurt doing it. So it's like, how do we find a path that's sustainable for someone that's older? And I think part of that is even if you're a 20-year-old instructor, you still have to look at it through the lens of what it would be like to be 40 and what it would be like if I'm inflexible or I haven't trained in 20 years. So what would be like the appropriate technique for that person? So like one of my guys, he's 65 years old. Triangles are not good for him. Like every time he throws up a triangle, I watch him. It's just half speed. It's so slow. He gets the leg thrown by every single time. So I worked with him on maybe that's not the best move for you. You need to understand how the triangle works. You need to know the mechanics of it because they're going to do it to you. But maybe it's not the best move for like a 65-year-old guy who's not very mobile for his age. So I think you have to also, as an instructor, regardless of what age you are, is look at it through their lens and try to find like the appropriate techniques, the appropriate moves, and the appropriate setting so that they can learn in that classroom.
Yeah, for sure. And you said that you started the platform when you were, or the group, the community, when you were a black belt. So you'd obviously been training most likely for at least 10 years at that point. How long had you been training up to black belt?
So my story to black belt is kind of interesting and different. I started in like the early 90s. I started jiu-jitsu around 95, and it was right after the early days. And I had a school at that point. I was running a martial arts school in Delaware here in the US, and I was trying to teach like this weird, like kind of hodgepodge mix of everything that I'd done already. So, I'd been doing traditional martial arts, and I was involved in kickboxing and boxing. So I was thought I was like Bruce Lee. I'm gonna incorporate all these styles and create like the perfect martial arts system, But at that time, like I at least, as goofy as it sounds now, at least I had my finger a little bit on the pulse in the sense of like I saw what was wrong with what I was doing. But I didn't understand grappling. Like that was a whole new thing to me. So when Hoist came along and I saw like, I think it was like the second UFC that I really saw, like someone gave me a VHS tape with 2 UFCs on it, 1 and 2. And I was like mind blown when I watched it. I was like, wow, this is the shit. And so I started, a bunch of friends and I had a school at the time. I was basically, I say a school, but I had a racquetball court that I rented out for $200 a month in a fitness center. We had 2 folding mats that were Velcroed together. We would sit in a circle with our feet pressed against them so 2 people could grapple. And we were just like learning. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't have any real instruction, but we were trying to figure out this grappling thing. And so in 1996, one of my friend, he signed me and him up for an MMA fight in Virginia. And at the time it was called no holds barred fighting. Like I didn't really know what I was doing, I don't even really feel like we even trained for it. Like I feel like it was like he told me we signed up, and then a couple months later we're like showing up at this fight, and we get there and there's like weigh-ins and there's Brazilians there, and there was this guy Leo Dalla who now is like this high-ranking black belt on the East Coast in the US. He's got this gnarly ear, and it's like 1996. You're looking at this guy like holy shit. And we ended up doing this MMA fight. I fought a blue belt from Canada, a BJJ blue belt. I didn't know anything about grappling, but I went like 30 minutes with him and I lost a decision. And it was a really cool experience because the next day Mario Yamasaki, who, you know, the UFC referee, always does the heart thing, right? Mario Yamasaki invited everybody down to his school, and we went down there the next day and we grappled with a bunch of the students. And then that was it. I was hooked. I started going down to Mario's school. It was like 2 or 3 hour drive every week, just there, 6 hour drive, 3 hours there, 3 hours back. Went down there and trained for a while, and just, you know, went back to my school that I was running at the time. And I told everybody at my school, I was like, we're not doing all that bullshit we were doing before. We're going to do jujitsu now. So we all bought a bunch of judo gis. They, you know, the ones with the craziest sleeves on them. We looked like wizards wearing them. And look, it was crazy. And then we just started like trying to figure out this jujitsu thing. Then eventually I ended up hooking up with Alon Goez and the original Carlson Gracie team in California. And that's kind of how I got my start, was, you know, just doing this MMA fight. But then here's the funny thing. So I ended up getting my purple belt in 1999, got my brown belt in 2001, and then I got my black belt in 2014. 13 years. So that was I had to sit, and I was training that entire time. So I went from getting on this record pace of getting my belts to like stalled for 13 years. And people always ask me, like, were you training the whole time? Yep, I was training the whole time. I went through bouts of depression, stuff in my personal life that just really slowed down that entire journey, jumped from a couple different instructors, and then kind of got my shit together around 2010 and just really hyper-focused on my training. I lost about 30, 40 pounds at the time, got myself in great shape, went back to competing again for the first time in 10 years, earned the respect of my instructors, and got my black belt in 2014 after being a brown belt 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's really good, though, because most instructors would have probably just given you it just through time served, and you're not actually maybe deserving a black belt. So it's really cool that you got yourself physically fit and, you know, got your head down and got your black belt, you know, because that's always a discussion, isn't it? It's always like, do people, you know, just by being on the mats, you deserve a black belt, or do you have to earn a black belt, you know?
And that's true, because, you know, the time during that tenure, as like, you know, during that 13 years, I watched guys who started with me as a white belt and when I was a brown belt get all the way to black belt before I got my black belt. I watched guys pass all the way through black belt. And actually at the time it drove me crazy. I was like, God, what the fuck is going on?
That, yeah.
You know, so it drove me crazy at the time. But like, and I saw guys that started with me at the same time get their black belts like 10 years before me. And it used to bug me. But then now when I look back at it in hindsight, it was it was worth it. Every second was worth it. I'm thankful that I got it as long as it took. It was worth doing it that way. Because every time, honestly, without sounding cheesy, but like every time I put my black belt on, I look down and I'm proud to put that belt on, because there was a point during that time where I was going to quit. I sat down with my wife at one point and was like, I think I'm just going to quit jiu-jitsu. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm never going to be a black belt. And I had this little pity party, and I was like, you know, but in the way that she explained it, and our kids trained at the time, she said, you know, if you quit, you've got to explain this to your children, like why you're quitting jiu-jitsu. My wife is also a black belt now too. So she was like, listen, I'm not going to quit. Like, if you want to quit, go ahead, but I'm not going to stop training. So there was enough pressure around me, healthy pressure around me, to keep me on the mats, and I'm thankful that I did.
Was there a point where you were like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years in, where you felt you were good enough to be a black belt, or did it take a long time for you? Did it take that 13 years to feel like you deserved your black belt?
So kind of what happened too was, you know, 2010, I lost my job, and I was teaching at a school, and I ended up moving back to New York and started working for a friend at his school. And the environment at that school was like, it was kind of a kill or be killed environment. Big school, big, you know, 50, 60 people on the mat at a time, tons of black belts, UFC fighters coming through the school all the time. So here I was, I show up as a brown belt, and like right away I was getting my ass handed to me by everybody. Like, I was just getting killed. Like, I was like, fuck, dude, I don't even want to be a brown belt now. Like, these guys were all killers. And so, you know, rising tide lifts all ships. So, you know, I kept training, and, you know, I got better, and and I think that I earned the respect of the people around me. And part of that was I just started going off and competing on my own again. And that alone allowed me, you know, the confidence to show up for open mat and to train hard. And so, you know, I think sometimes you've just got to, like, you know, push yourself a little bit, and, you know, not be afraid to look like shit for a while, because that's kind of how it is in jiu-jitsu. Like, you know, the mats don't lie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the biggest thing in it.
Yeah, definitely. And I can empathise with some of that actually, mate, because he was smirking because I was a purple belt for 9 years.
Oh fuck, you know.
and yeah, same thing. One of our coaches now, he was a white belt when I was a purple belt, and with my head coach's blessing, I gave him his belt, and then he got his brown belt like 5-6 years ago, and I'm still sat there as a purple belt. So I've experienced that as well, and likewise, I've seen people that were probably white belts when I was getting my purple belt that are now black belts.
Yeah, and you want to be happy for them. Like, you're like, I'm stoked for these dudes, but I'm also like privately kind of like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, do I just suck? Because there were times where I thought like, and even at the point where like I had earned my instructor's respect, I was competing again, I was having success doing that. There was a point about a year before I got my black belt that I was like kind of campaigning for my black belt. I was telling my instructors like, listen, I feel like I've done it all. Like, what else do I need to do now? Like, you know, and they said, you're still not ready. Like, you still need a little bit more time. And the funny thing was at the time, I didn't think I did. But when I look back at that last year, I kind of did need a little bit more time as a brown belt. And that last year was super helpful. And it wasn't my ego trying to like determine like what was going to happen there versus like trusting in my instructors that their observations and what they knew. They were black belts. I wasn't a black belt yet. Yeah, I was a brown belt for 13 years, but I still wasn't a black belt. And sometimes I think as students, you know, maybe you're a blue belt out there and you're like, God, I keep seeing all these guys, they're progressing, they're getting better than me. I don't understand it. You're looking at it through a blue belt's eyes right now. You're not seeing it from your coach's eyes, and your coach is a lot more experienced, and you have to trust in them. And if you don't trust in them, maybe it's not the best coach for you then, you know?
I think odd scrap belts, personally, I think they cause so much fucking issues with people not wanting to come back and train. They, you know, people like quit jiu-jitsu so much because of they don't get promoted, or they see other people get promoted, or they have time away from the mats, they come back, they don't feel like they're a black belt or a brown belt anymore. It's just, I understand why the belts are important, and again, if you get a black belt, it's an unbelievable achievement, but everything in between to me seems just bollocks, really, you know, because it's all different levels, different ages, different. It just seems to complicate things, and it, in my opinion, it drives more people away from the sport than brings them in.
No, that's a good point. I think that the structure of the belts I think can be helpful, but I also think that like anything, they, you know, depending on the instructor, like there's a lot of instructors out there that, you know, use the belts as a tool for like their finances or for ways to like control people, or, you know, and all that kind of weird stuff. So I think like anything, it can be used in a bad way. And I think it can be, you know, it can be not great always for the students too. I think it depends on how much like weight you're putting into that as well.
I think that's how it was probably originally formed, as belts were there to show like when people obviously progress, but when they have got to probably pay money, and when they've earned their rights, and a form of control. That's what I always think. It's the power that, because you really want to see your progression. But imagine if belts weren't a thing. Like, it would just change the whole face of the whole sport. People would wouldn't ever really take time off from jiu-jitsu because they weren't being promoted, or they have had time off, because it wouldn't matter. It'd be like, Paul's really good at jiu-jitsu. He has time off. He comes back, he's a bit rusty, but he's not like having to fight this 22-year-old blue belt and think, he's subbed me today, I'm fucking shit, I'm going to have more time off. Do you see what I mean? It just, that sort of stuff. That's the bit that always like frustrates me, that people have time off.
I think that's a young man in you talking there, though, mate. Because this is where I think like belts are helpful. It's as you get older and you get out, sort of you can't sort of match the younger guys with their physicality. If there were no belts involved, by the time you're 40, 50 years old, and you might be able to correct me here if I'm wrong, Mike, but I feel like you might have 20, 30 years on the mats, and that means something.
Yeah.
But you're getting smashed by a guy who's been in for 2 years because he's 25 and athletic. And anybody looking in at that will just think you're just an old guy, rubbish at jiu-jitsu. And I feel like the belt at least gives you some credibility of the time that you've spent, despite the fact that your body's maybe diminishing.
I agree. But then at the same time, you're still getting smashed by that 22-year-old. You shouldn't be expected to beat a 50. This is my biggest argument with jiu-jitsu, and I find it really stupid. It's like, you don't see someone at 55 expected to beat a 22-year-old at any other sport. You know, and I understand technique is important. Obviously, that's what jiu-jitsu is. It's, you know, 80% technique. But
if you don't have belts, that's ultimately all it really comes down to. So after 30, 40 years of jiu-jitsu, you're just getting beat up by younger guys.
But isn't it about the fun, not about what you're showing? You know what I mean? Like, isn't it a hobby to like 90% of us? It's a hobby that we really enjoy, and the better we get and the more we learn, and you know what I mean? Like
it is, but I like to have something that you can, that like from an external lens that you can show for it.
Yeah, like I understand what you're saying. I'm not like saying it's not. I just think like it just ends up causing so much problems with like coaches, like you said, like holding people back and being like dicks about it. I just can't be asked of it.
Anyway, should we see what our guest thinks?
What do you think, Mike? I'm like, this is interesting. I was like, no, I think there's value in both. I mean, the truth is always somewhere in the middle anyhow. So I feel like there's definitely value in both. I don't think anybody who's over 50 should be expected to beat like a 20-year-old. And I think that it's important for the instructor to be clear about the goal of that as well to the students, because your ego may say one thing and your body's saying another thing. I never trust my ego, but I trust my body. So, you know, and that's an important thing for students to recognize that, you know, at 50, you're not expected to, but you also like as a 50-year-old, or even like my guy, Bill, who's 65, like he still wants to come to an open mat and just not like get his ass handed to him every single round. Like he's still, and I'm not saying people should baby him because they don't, but he also needs to have skill sets that make sense for his age too, so that he can find some success on the mats. And I think it's possible for people to do that, you know. And here's the other thing, like a lot of these guys that come in that I've talked to online and guys that train with me that are in their 60s are probably never going to be a black belt. They're too old. It's probably, they're not going to live long enough to make it to black belt, you know. If you're starting jiu-jitsu at 65 years old, I don't know, you might live to 75, 80, maybe you will, but maybe you won't be able to continue doing jiu-jitsu too. So it's like, one of the biggest values for me I'll be 56 this week. When I look at my training now compared to when I was 42, I can't roll every single round every single week. It's impossible for me now. I can't physically do it. I have open mats. Like last week I came and I rolled a bunch of rounds, 7, 8 rounds, felt great. There's some of those open mats where I might roll 3 or 4 rounds. So I have to look at my training different all the time. But because of that, I'm so appreciative of the time on the mats. Like I'm so thankful if it's, you know, 4 rounds this week, I'm going to fucking love those 4 rounds. When I was 42, I could probably roll a lot more rounds than I can now. But I have to sort of balance out this equation for myself so that, like, for me, sustainability means that whatever I do today has to outlive the present moment. I need to be able to, like, function tomorrow. And I'm not a normal guy. Like, I run a school for a living. A normal guy has got to, like, maybe go to work tomorrow or, like, go home and, like, fucking go to Costco on Saturday and run errands with his wife. And like, if I got twins at home, I've got 5-year-old twins. I want to be able to pick up my kids. I don't want to feel like when I get home, I can't pick up my kid because my back's jacked up. So there's this important like sustainability balance in this equation of time on the mats, time off the mats. What does recovery look like? And what does it mean to be a 56-year-old practitioner of jiu-jitsu? I'm not 42. I'm not 27 anymore like when I started. And I have to look at it through that lens now, which is going to be different, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you a question, Mike, because it's something that I think about a little bit. And it's a conversation that I had with a training partner who's a similar age to you recently. And then I think the response could segue in then to maybe what people can do to mitigate, you know, sort of damage on the body and everything else. But like diminishing returns. So like I often think about the fact, is there a point, am I maybe even at a point now where my body is going to sort of start decreasing like at a faster rate than my knowledge of jiu-jitsu is increasing? So like in regard to my output on the mats and my performance, you know, am I the best now than I'm ever going to be, even if my jiu-jitsu knowledge increases because my body is getting older? Is this me? That's
a great question, because my jiu-jitsu now at 56 looks different than when I was in my early 40s. Just the techniques that I choose to do now, how I think about those techniques, what I'm willing to, like, how hard I'm willing to squeeze them, that kind of thing. So like I was always kind of a crazy kind of grappler. Like I like to do cartwheels over people, do a lot of kind of very athletic jiu-jitsu. I was a very athletic practitioner. I'd rely more on athleticism than even probably technique. Like if you think about on one side, you have leverage, timing, and technique. On the other side, you have athleticism, strength, and speed. I was definitely on the physicality side more than I was on the technique side. But as I've gotten older now, I appreciate the technique way more now than I did when I was a younger practitioner. And I appreciate the simplicity of a technique now way more than I did before. I appreciate like slowing shit down and like really being more mechanical and technical. Like I feel like that's way more rewarding when I'm rolling with somebody and I slow the whole game down and tap them out like super slow. I feel like that, and it resonates with me. Like I feel like, wow, that's way cooler than if I get sucked into their 100 miles an hour grappling, and then I'm exhausted, and then I throw up a technique on them, then I'm freaking tired and I can't finish the round or don't want to finish the round. That doesn't feel like a sustainable practice for me. So as I've gotten older, I've just adjusted the volume of my game. The frequency of the game, how often I can grapple. Like I said before, maybe it's 1 week, it'll be 20 rounds or every single day. And then there's a week, maybe it's going to be a lot less rounds that week. So I'm open to all possibilities with it. I don't try to like let my ego like kind of reign supreme. Like I said, I don't trust my ego. I trust my body. My ego is going to say, roll every day. Come on, you little fucking pussy. Like you need to get out there and kill yourself. Right. Like I can't listen to that guy anymore because he's going to get me into a lot of trouble now. You know what I mean? So versus like the actual, like the value of age, part of age is wisdom, right? You've lived a lot of life experience. You can look back and say, oh, the last time I did that, I got hurt doing that. So I just adjust the frequency and the volume now more than anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's maybe just sort of break down, I guess, some of the different components of I guess, jiu-jitsu, from the training, nutrition, the supplementary exercise, the recovery, and maybe offer some advice to our sort of listeners who are maybe around this sort of age now and are maybe struggling a little bit physically. So you just kind of covered a little bit there, but when you think about, I guess, going to a session, what is the advice to somebody who's maybe sort of beyond 40 or after 40 doing jiu-jitsu, in regard to how they approach that session? Is it picking your partner smartly? Is it taking rounds off? What's your advice?
I think it's all of that. I think when we're talking about like showing up for the open mat, you've got to be mindful about who you're rolling with. I think it's okay to say no to people. Like, I think it's definitely okay to say no to people. If you're like, that dude is crazy. Last time I rolled with him, he was just going balls to the wall, trying to rip my head off. I don't feel like doing that today. I think it's okay to say no thanks. Like, I think it's okay to sit out a round if you need to. But I also think you've got to balance that though. If you're like taking off the round because you're like, oh, I'm just a little bit tired, my cardio sucks, then you probably need to do the round. But you've also got to be mindful that if you're going to roll when you're exhausted, that you're not putting your body at risk too, because your timing's going to be off, your reaction's going to be off, things are going to move a little bit slower for you. So you have to be kind of careful as far as like, are you that exhausted that like you're going to get injured, or are you just like tired because you're tired? And then I think you have to make sure that you're doing everything right in your life off the mats so that your time on the mats is going to be successful. So if you come to an open mat and you're like, I haven't hydrated all day, I ate like shit today, I had a crappy night's sleep last night, and then at the end of the open mat, you're like, well, I think my jiu-jitsu sucks. It's like, no, your jiu-jitsu doesn't suck. Your life sucks. You have terrible, terrible habits, and you need to fix all that shit because it's definitely affecting your time on the mats. So whether you're 35 or 45 or 55, doing everything right off the mats is going to make for a more successful experience on the mats. What are you eating? Are you eating good, healthy foods? Are you getting lots of hydration on the days that you're training? Are you taking the right supplements? Are you doing some sort of strength training 3 or 4 days a week? On your off days, are you stretching at home? Is there some sort of flexibility that you've worked into your regimen? Are you doing all the recovery stuff? What do you do for recovery? Do you stretch? Do you take a day off to stretch? Do you do like an ice bath, or do you do hot baths with magnesium? What do you do like are you getting massages? Have you tried acupuncture? So trying to figure out, what does your recovery look like? What does your off the mat time look like? And then what does your on the mat time look like?
Yeah, there's a lot to consider, I think, as an older jiu-jitsu grappler, right? Thinking about your kind of sparring or your rolling. So it's just something that I tend to do and have done for a little while is I'll maybe spar a little bit more often than maybe I should. But what I try and do is undulate the intensity. And some of that is around partner selection, so avoiding certain people in the gym. But also, you know, the position I might play, maybe guard opposed to top game. You know, I won't wrestle as much. I'll pull guard. I won't get into as many scrambles, and you know, I won't squeeze and hold on things that I might otherwise doing if I'm trying to win. So is that something that you recommend or ever tried?
So, you know, trying to slow things down, you know, especially with gi, it's a lot easier to slow things down. You can make it a lot more static. You can take, you know, shorter sprints to positions, like not big moves. Like if you're doing like a bullfighter pass and you're trying to do it on a 20-year-old that moves really fast, like that's a pretty big move to try to pull off on a smaller guy. And then if you do that 3 or 4 times and fail at it, now you're tired, right? Now you're exposed. So trying to slow the game down a lot, being mindful of even like what techniques you're doing. Like I'm a big triangle guy. But I've noticed, like, if I just keep throwing triangles up, my knees start hurting after a while. My hips start hurting. So I try to balance it out, maybe working more chokes, more cross-collar chokes, or more arm choking techniques. So building a game, too, that's sustainable with your body. Like, if you're, like, a total triangle guy, you've got to have some balance to that with, like, are you adding Darce chokes? Are you adding anacondas? Are you doing arm triangles? Are you doing something with your arms too so that you can give your legs a break? If you were on the opposite end of that and you're like an arm choking guy, then what are you doing with your legs now? How are you going to work that into your game? So finding a game that's kind of balances out both of those. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And how about like warm-ups and cool-downs? Is this something that you tend to do more of now you're a little bit older and that you recommend?
So my hard and fast rule for myself is I won't roll with anybody cold. Like I will not roll cold. I used to roll cold all the time. I'd be like, oh yeah, let's just roll. And the next thing you know, something doesn't feel right. You want to make sure that your range of motion is good before you roll. You don't want to have your legs thrown over your head and your legs forced to the floor and you're not even there yet or can't even maybe even do that. So I think that, you know, I know some people say, oh, I hate warm-ups. I'm not paying to go in there and do a bunch of exercises and stuff like that. And I understand some schools don't do really any warm-ups. I think it's up to you to make sure you're warmed up before you get in there. Like I tell my students, like you should do something at home for like 20 minutes, get your body warmed up, get yourself loose a little bit before you walk in the door, spend like 30 minutes stretching before you come to class. Again, I won't roll with anybody unless I've put my legs over my head a couple times, stretched out my back, make sure that my hips are loose, make sure I'm just feeling really good for a second before I'm going to even jump into rolling with somebody. So I think it's really important to make sure you warm up.
Yeah, do you think there's any sort of responsibility on the coach there? Because obviously, as you can appreciate, you kind of touched on it already, but some people just won't have the time to take maybe 30 minutes, even 5 minutes before a class. Some people are skidding in straight from work, throwing the gear on, and they're straight on the mats. Do you think there's some responsibility for a coach to create a practice that involves like an effective warm up, whether it's through the drilling or whatever they're doing prior to sparring?
I think it's a smart idea. Like if you want to keep your students, it's a good idea. You know, as an instructor, your goal is to get them, or at least for me, my goal is to get my students to black belt. Like I don't ever say, oh, I want my students to be better than me. It's like, I'm not part of the equation. I want them to be better than themselves. You know, so it's always about like them constantly looking back at the mirror and seeing, you know, that they're improving over time. And part of that is I got to create an environment that's conducive to that. Like I got to make sure that they're taken care of. Like I can't have a 65-year-old guy come into class and just throwing him into like a round, like the second he walks in the door, or some high intensity like drill that's going to, possibly injure him, regardless of whether he's 65 or 25. It just makes sense that your body needs to be warmed up. So I think as an instructor, for me, I think it's my responsibility to make sure that they're warmed up. And I also recognize, like what you're saying, that some people are like literally like going from work straight to class and they're not warmed up. So I always try to leave time to make sure that people do get properly warmed up and their bodies are stretched out before we dive into anything. And also adjusting the frequency for them too. Like if we're starting, I like functional warm-ups. I don't really want to do like jumping jacks and just running around the room or some bullshit like that. It needs to be something that has to do with what we're training that day. So if we're teaching a specific technique or a guard pass, we might be doing some light like pass and sweep or something like that from the guard, but we're going to do it at a very low volume. So I'll tell my students on a scale from 1 to 10, if 10 is 100%, then 1 is like 10%. I want you guys to stay between like 2 and 3 right now, 20 to 30%. And if I see someone who's increasing the volume, I say, hey, you got to turn that down a little bit. We're not there yet. And it's the same thing when I roll. Like, I don't want to roll 100% from the beginning of a round. I hate that. Like, I like the idea of starting here and ending up way up here eventually. Like, we're going to get there, but we don't need to start there. Like, we're going to start with this nice pace, and then we will find our way there. I guarantee it. But we don't need to start there either. And the same thing for a student walking into a class. They don't need to start at 10. They can start here at 1 or 2.
Do you ever believe in flow rolling to warm up?
Say that again?
Do you ever believe in flow rolling to warm up?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
just like
Yes.
move in and flow in and
just exchanging techniques. Yep. And one of the things we do with that is we have them close their eyes when they're flow rolling too. So we have a couple people making sure no one runs into each other, kills each other, but just even closing your eyes for a moment and just removing all the distractions and just getting into that movement and roll is awesome. It also teaches proprioception. So as far as like limb awareness, where are my legs in reference to their legs? Where are my arms? Where's my body in reference to their body? So like if someone's never tried grappling with your eyes closed, like that's a really, really great thing to try.
yeah, me and Phil used to do that quite a bit during the
Really?
day class. Yeah, he used to say all the time, "Oh, we'll flow roll, but we'll shut our eyes." And I was like, "Oh, okay, try that," because he's into that all the time.
Is that like the lights off sort of thing with the chick? Is it? He just didn't
Pretty
want to look.
much,
Just didn't want to look at that.
I don't blame him, to be honest. Yeah.
You're like, no eye contact. Don't look me in the eyes.
It's not gay.
It's like, close your eyes.
No, but flow rolling's really good. I think the only problem with flow rolling is if people are new.
Yeah.
Like if people are like what you tell a white belt to flow roll and they're like unless they're been doing it for a year, say, or something. But even then, sometimes they struggle. But other than that, I think it's great. And as long as you've got a good instructor, maybe telling them like calm down.
Yeah, you have to be there kind of on top of them. And it's good, too, if you have a new beginner, you can always put them with a more experienced student so they can kind of lead the dance a little bit, so to speak, versus like you get two crazy new white belts. It's the idea of flowing is going to go out the window after like 2 seconds because they're good. And it's not like, everybody's like, oh, fucking spazzy white belts. It's like they're not really spazzy white belts. They just don't know what the hell they're doing. Like if you walked into a class to learn a foreign language, the first class, the teacher wouldn't be like, oh, you're such a spaz. Look at you. Like you fucking retard. You don't know how to use the words the right way. Do you know what I mean? No one's going to talk to you like that. Like people are going to go, oh, he just doesn't know what he's doing. He's like, Yeah. So in our ecosystem, it's a white belt. They know not what they do, but you've got to give them like the right partner so that they can do it the right way. So maybe you're giving them a more experienced student or something like that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. It's not too long ago since I was that, spaz walking in, and I find that so weird when I come in, like just people calling you a spazzy white belt. I was like, who the fuck are you talking to? Like,
I don't know. Of course I am. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But, and here's the thing too. Like I roll with new white belts all the time. I love rolling with white belts like that. And I like the idea actually that I have to think about they're going to elbow me in the face or they're going to knee me. It's not their fault. It's my own fault. I'm a freaking black belt. I should be able to like be mindful. Like if someone's got side control, I'm keeping my hand here, watching out for elbows and shit like that because I know that they're probably going to do that. So I'm okay with that. And if I get caught with one, it's honestly my fault. Like I should be aware that this guy's a new white belt. And I think it's actually healthy for upper belts to roll with like a spazzy white belt. Like if you want to equate it to like, self-defense or whatever, you could say that that's the closest thing probably to like a normal person, so it's, and there's a lot of weird things that happen when they're rolling with you that you're not always used to. It's a different rhythm, a different pace. It's not always fun because you just feel like he's just all over me. But I think it's important for you to see what that feels like from your perspective, but also to see what it means to be a spazzy white belt again and how their body kind of does move in those positions. Because if they're catching you with elbows, they're also going to be catching that other white belt with an elbow. So you can kind of like, as an upper belt, fix some of that stuff. Hey, keep your elbows tight. Watch what you're doing with your body. Your whole body doesn't need to move at once. That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
Miss those days.
You also mentioned about using the gi to kind of slow the pace of a round as well there, Mike. And I found myself as I've got a bit older, and it was something that Chewy talked about when we spoke to him as well, but I find that I've moved away from the gi as I've got older just because of my hands, and I just find that when people are ripping on it and, they've got a lapel around my knee or something, I just don't tend to enjoy it so much. But do you still find it's quite comfortable to do as you've got older?
I like both. Here's the thing too. I was the guy, this was actually one of the reasons, like I didn't get my black belt for a long time. I was the guy who showed up to open mats, to gi open mats without a gi on. Like I only wanted, and then when I competed, I
Sounds
only
like
wanted, right. And when I competed, I only wanted to compete no gi. Like I was very hung up on no gi. But if you listen to what I said earlier, I was a very athletic grappler. So like I could get away with a lot of shit no gi that I couldn't get away with gi. So it was a very athletic based game of jiu-jitsu for me. So, but I like both, you know, I like the idea of slowing things down with the gi, and I like the idea of the freedom of no gi, but I've had to adjust how I train gi as I've gotten older. So I don't do any Ezekiels anymore like this. I've changed how I do my Ezekiels. I've pretty much gone to like all of my counter chokes are using the tail of the gi, like the bottom of the gi, so that I can grab around it versus like sticking my hands inside the gi all the time and getting my fingertips compressed. My biggest problem with my hands are my thumbs. My thumbs are kind of jacked up a little bit. So I try to do techniques that I'm not compromising my hands anymore. I don't do any spider guard anymore. Do a lot of that tail and lapel stuff, but nothing where I'm reaching inside the gi. I don't do a lot of cross grips anymore. So I've adjusted like how I train with the gi so that I can continue with the gi. But I also appreciate like training no gi too. So I like both. You know, I found a way to figure it out for myself where I can do both.
Yeah, I think what you've done there is smart. Maybe something that I need to think about doing when I train in the gi. But yeah, it's definitely the grips, the where you know the pocket grips that seem to do the most damage.
Yeah, you can't do those. Like they're just not sustainable. Like I think if you go to the tail, like the bottom of the gi, where you're grabbing it like this here with your hand wrapped around it, you have a quick release on everything. Even if you think about like I'm a big baseball bat choke guy, right? Okay, so if you baseball bat choke somebody inside their actual gi, their collar, you will jack up your fingertips because it's that constant compression of the fingertips here, squeezing like this. That's why those top knuckles get so gnarly looking, right? And mine actually aren't bad at all. But I don't do those chokes like that anymore. So if I'm going to do a baseball bat choke, I'm going to take the tail of the gi where I can grab around something and not inside of something. And that's going to save your fingertips. Like you can build an entire lapel choking game around that without actually messing up your hands.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And when you do get injuries, obviously jiu-jitsu, I think maybe some sports are similar, but jiu-jitsu seems to be the worst for it, where you get injured and you just wrap tape around it and you just persevere and turn up and try and train anyway. I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of managing injuries when you've got them?
I don't think that students should totally drop out when they get injured. I think there's a rhythm still. I think sometimes you can go in and do what you can do, but maybe it's not what you were doing before. Maybe it's watching for a little bit, you know, maybe it's doing what techniques you can do right now. Maybe it's watching the techniques. Because I think, you know, it's the value of jiu-jitsu isn't just the techniques. It's not the grappling. It's really the community for a lot of people. It's even mental health for a lot of people. Just having like a place to go. You know, when I was growing up, my dad had like the Elks Club or some shit. I don't even remember what it was called, but he went somewhere with a bunch of dudes, and I don't even know what they did, play cards or something, right? But it was still a place for somewhere to go to where you could talk to people and hang out and do guy shit, right? Like a lot of people aren't like into church and stuff like that anymore. So it's like, I don't think jiu-jitsu is like a church necessarily, but I do think there's a social component that's sort of similar. So I think when people totally drop out, it's not great for their mental health. I think even having one foot on the mat can be good during an injury, but I also don't think you should just like wrap some tape around it and go like you were before. And I think an injury is also a great moment of reflection and insight. You can stop for a moment and go, wait a second, why did that even happen? Like for myself, I popped my rib out a few years ago. It was right before I got my black belt, and I was training for a tournament. And I was rolling with a purple belt at the time. And we were like last 30 seconds of the round. I stood up and he shot in for a double leg. And I was so mad that he took me down because I like took pride in the fact that I was hard to take down. And he took me down. I throw him in my guard. I throw up a quick triangle. He's cutting the angle on me. I'm squeezing it like I've never squeezed a fucking triangle before. Boom, my rib pops out. I squeezed it so hard, my rib popped out. And, you know, and if you've had that rib injury, dude, it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible injury. It takes forever to heal. It constantly pops in and out for a while, and then it just kind of settles down. But it was a pretty shitty injury. But I literally did it to myself. I literally did that to myself. And that was a great lesson in ego. It's like, because after that injury, like I missed the tournament that weekend. I was out for a couple months. It took forever to heal. And I got this stupid like rib that sticks out all weird. And it all could have easily been prevented. Like, because there's times where you need to be like 100% intense at your jiu-jitsu. Maybe at the tournament, that would have been great. I could have saved that for the tournament. But I did the thing in class. I did it the wrong time. I gave my jiu-jitsu full intensity at the absolutely wrong moment. If that had happened in a tournament, I popped it out, I would have probably been like, fuck, it happens, whatever. But to do it like the week before the tournament and then now be injured and have this thing, it's like it wasn't worth it. So I think injuries are great moments for insight and great moments for reflection to ask yourself, how did that even happen? Was it something I did, or was it just some weird thing that happened? And then, maybe fix it for next time, course correct,
Yeah, no, I laughed because I have a weird sticky out rib as well, mate. So,
dude, isn't that terrible? It's so weird looking too, right?
Yeah, it's
like cauliflower of your ribs.
Oh, mate, I've got a 5-year-old as well, and he was laying on me the other day, and I just had to readjust constantly because it felt like something was digging into my side, but it was actually just my rib digging out of my side, and it was just like...
Yeah, it's one of those like semi-common injuries in jiu-jitsu. I wouldn't say like everybody gets it, but it's probably like, 5 out of 10 people end up having that injury. It's a sucky one.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you pop yours? Is that what happened to yours?
I think so, yeah. I wasn't too sure because I didn't bother getting it x-rayed or anything. I just rested it up. But I've torn 2 intercostals previously probably about 10 years ago. That was pretty bad.
They take so long to heal, mate.
Yeah, it was real bad.
Mine was. It took forever.
Yeah, but I think I must have popped it. I wasn't sure, but it's yeah.
Was that where you rolled with Sam recently?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Fucking
yeah. But yeah, no, it was a pain. So what's like the worst injury you've had? Was it the ribs, or have you had surgeries or anything?
I had a couple hernias fixed last year.
Okay.
So that was probably the main. Like I had a surgery last year for 2 hernias. It wasn't like horrible. Like I'd had them actually for years. The hernias, injured it like years ago and just never got them fixed. And then they were getting to the point where they were starting to be a problem in terms of like, they would hurt when I lifted, but it was my stomach hurt and stuff. So it was worth getting them fixed. It wasn't like the end of the world, but it definitely took me, a few months to get back to training again. And it even adjusted. Like there was a great lesson in that too. Like I started going to I had to adjust my guard. I started working more Z guard after that because I needed this like frame in front of my stomach constantly. So I started working more of a Z guard game, and it was kind of cool because it let me develop an entire new aspect of my guard that I had never developed before. And it was more just based on the fact that I didn't want anybody to put any pressure on my stomach for a while. The injury itself is fully healed now, and I feel great. And I came away with a new guard from it. So I don't know. Wasn't the end of the world, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good trade-off. That's not too bad. And then you mentioned about competing as well. Is this something that you maybe encourage students or still do yourself? Do you tend to compete like now you're into your throughout your 40s, now you're into your 50s as well?
I don't know if I would compete again. I haven't competed in a while now. I would consider it possibly, but I didn't say the door is totally closed, but it's probably mostly closed. I just don't feel the desire to want to do it anymore, mostly because I run my academy full time. I spend time with my family for the type of training that I feel like I would need to do to be successful at it. I just don't know that I want to do that anymore. So, but I also encourage my students. I don't encourage them or discourage them from tournaments. If they come to me and say, listen, my dream is to go to a jiu-jitsu tournament, and I would say, let me support you in that. Let me help you do that. Let me give you whatever advice I can to do that. I also, if they said they never want to do a jiu-jitsu tournament ever, I would say why. And if it made sense that they didn't want to do it, then I would support that too. I don't think it's necessarily for everybody. I love my experience. I would never change it for anything. It helped me grow so much as a martial artist. It allowed me to get to my black belt. So it was really, really important for me, but I'm also not the same as everybody else. So I think you've got to find a path that works for you. So I don't really pressure people one way or the other. I think they know best for themselves, what they really want. Yeah.
I just wonder sometimes if competing, not just for blokes and girls that are in their 40s, but just in general, whether competing sometimes, if they're not well coached or, have a, good guidance, it sometimes encourages poor training habits where, they might roll a bit hard in the gym, like you said, with the chap that did your ribs in. If you didn't have that competition come up, would you have been so passionate about not getting that takedown? I don't know. And yeah, I just sometimes worry if, maybe people are competing as they get older, they feel obliged to maybe go in, spar more often than they should, spar harder than they should, try and win rounds in the gym. and that can then lead to maybe injuries and, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah, so you definitely, like, if you're going to compete after 40, 50 or whatever, you have to, you know, do all of the things right. And part of that is, from my lesson, like, you need to save some for the day of the tournament. Like, you can't put it all on the line in class and save some for the day of the tournament. And I'm real with people too. Like, if you came to me and you were 50 and you said, I think I want to do a tournament, I would say, well, here's what you got to think about. And if you were a blue belt and it was your first tournament, I would say, hey, listen, this is what you got to think about. You're going to go there. There may or may not be someone your weight. You may not be able to go against someone your age. You may have to go against someone younger than you. And probably all the guys your age are going to be on TRT too. So they're going to be a bunch of jacked up dudes. You got to be prepared. Well, it's the truth, right?
Yeah, 100% is the truth. Yeah.
Right. So you need to be real about yourself. Like, is this something I can handle? Like, is this something I want to do? You know, so I think you've got to consider all of that if you're going to go do a tournament after 40 or 50 years old. Like, you know, it's not, and jiu-jitsu now too, it's not like it used to be. Even when I was coming up doing tournaments, the guys that compete now, like the hobbyists, treat it like it's a profession. They're not like just dudes showing up at a tournament like, oh, I think I want to try my first jiu-jitsu tournament this weekend. You might be that guy actually, but the rest of the dudes are probably not that guy. They're dudes that are doing this like full-time pretty much. They're doing private lessons. They're doing all the things probably right or wrong, depending on how you look at it. But either way, they're probably going to maybe be in a better position than you competing, depending on if you're doing all that same shit or not, you know. But you definitely got to think about that.
I just don't know how important competing is. I hear a lot of people going, oh, it's worth 6 months of training and it's worth this and it's that. And I get the intensity of the competition and other stuff. And I get that if you're going to compete, you're going to train harder for it. So I understand that type of thing. But I don't know. I think sometimes there's a lot of emphasis put on competing, probably too much. And I think, again, it discourages people.
Yeah, and I think if you felt like as a student, like there was that pressure, like you had to compete, you're probably going to push students away because it's just not for everybody. I don't think it's mentally and emotionally for everybody. It's for some people, but it's not for everybody for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's funny that you mentioned about the TRT because that was something that I wanted to talk to you about was sort of supplementation, but specifically around, you know, maybe the less legal types and certainly TRT. We know that jiu-jitsu, you know, for want of a better term, is a bit of a dirty sport, and a lot of athletes maybe take enhancements. And you know, I think you guys in the US are probably a little bit further along with this than we are in the UK, where actually there is a little bit more of a acceptance around older guys maybe getting on hormone replacement therapy, but doing it correctly. The UK is still a little bit backward around it. I think certainly our National Health Service is, but there's a lot more private clinics opening up and that type of thing. And obviously there's nothing wrong if someone's symptomatic and they have a true deficiency in their hormones, their testosterone, and they take, you know, medicated, prescribed by a doctor, hormone replacement to bring that up to an optimal level. But I guess when you're competing, is there like that you know, that desire to maybe get an edge and maybe take more than you should? I mean, what are your thoughts on that as a topic?
Yeah, that definitely probably comes up. I think if people need it, like, listen, like, obviously, I mean, I've got students that have to take TRT, but, you know, I had my levels checked. I was over 1,000. So I was like, well, I don't need TRT then, obviously, right?
Good effort.
Here's the funny part, you know, so when I was like, I had to go do all my blood work anyhow. I was like, well, let's check my testosterone. My doctor called me and she's like, are you taking something right now? Like, are you taking steroids or something? I was like, no. She's like, well, your levels are really high. My dad's levels are really high too. He's like 77 years old and his were like 900 or something. It's like some crazy shit. I know, like, it makes no sense. You know, so it's like, if someone truly needs it, if their levels are low, like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not there to say like what they need or don't need. If they obviously need that, I think it's great that it exists for people that need it. But I also think there could be a propensity to want to like take more or do something that you're not supposed to do. Listen, for myself, like when I was competing years ago, like early 2000s, I started messing around with steroids, like illegal steroids. I was 160 pounds at the time, 170 pounds. And I thought, wow, if I get up to like over 200 pounds, I'm going to be freaking awesome at jiu-jitsu. So, you know, I did all the research and I learned about steroids. And I even had a friend who was a pharmacist and he, you know, was a good person, a good resource to learn about it. And I told myself I would never stack stuff. And I told myself I would never reuse needles. Well, within like 6 months, I started stacking all kinds of shit. I couldn't get needles, so I started reusing needles, and I was starting to like take health risks, like really serious health risks with myself. And I started feeling like kind of like a junkie, like I was doing these drugs now, and like, so I got big. I got up to about 200 pounds, and I was like pretty fucking strong at the time. And I remember one time I had all this acne all over my face. And one of my friends is like, dude, are you taking steroids? And I about lost it on him, dude. I went into like a roid rage about like the steroid thing. And then, I went to a tournament and I competed, and I competed at like, it was like something like 199 to 205, right? I was barely making it to 200 pounds, taking steroids. All the guys in there were twice as big as me. They were guys that were like 220 cutting down to 205. And so I did okay, got like second or third place, but I felt like these guys were so big, I could never be that big. I took a look at my life and I realized I was like turning into like a junkie. Like I was getting needles and doing all kinds of weird shit now. And so I cut it off. And for me, it was like, I would never do that again, But that's very different than like TRT. TRT is like actual, therapy for people that need it. This was like me, like thinking that I needed to be bigger. And I think there's a propensity sometimes in jiu-jitsu to think that if you got really, really big and giant, like that would make your jiu-jitsu better. And it might, like if you're already really good at jiu-jitsu and you get really, really big, you're probably going to be really, really good. But it doesn't mean that's a healthy lifestyle or that has sustainability, because, had I stayed on that path, it definitely would have ended in something bad for sure.
Yeah, and then you do see it a lot. I mean, we won't mention any names, but obviously people listening and yourself will know exactly what we're talking about when we think about people in the game that are notorious for taking steroids. And, maybe it did or didn't, get them to where they are, but maybe now that they're starting.
But here's the thing with those dudes. They were already good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah,
they were already really good at jiu-jitsu. Like, like there's guys that were like, that were like already doing awesome at jiu-jitsu, killing everybody. Did they really need to go up and get like that much bigger? I don't know. That's for them to decide. But you can sort of like step back and see that and go, wow, that's kind of crazy,
Yeah, but this is the thing, I think, isn't it? If you feel like you're losing an edge because everybody else is doing something, then, if you want to be the best, then you kind of feel you need to jump on board with that. And I think with the masters divisions, it's a weird one, because to some degree, it's like that should be a protected division where, you are against other busy working dads with diminishing hormones, but instead you're against these guys that
are jacked up.
Yeah.
They're fucking jacked.
Yeah, and it almost like defeats the object of or the point of a masters division.
I think the problem is as well is so many people go, I'm on TRT, and they're taking, so much test. It's not TRT, like they'll go, yeah, I'm taking TRT. It's not. And then the other thing as well, I find, like what you said, it becomes like reminds me of like weed. It's like a gateway drug. They start on a bit of TRT that they might be deficient on, and then all of a sudden then they're taking more than they should, and then they're taking, I'll add in this and I'll add in that, and then before you know it, they're stacking, and they're going, I'm on TRT. You're not fucking on TRT.
It's exactly like the path that I was on. Like I was like really like adamant about that. I was like, listen, I'm not going to stack stuff, and I'm not going to reuse needles. Like I'm going to do all the right things. But then all of a sudden you're like, I want to get bigger, and I want to get bigger than that. I want to, so it starts. And especially if you have that kind of addictive type personality where it's like, you just want to get bigger and bigger. It's easy to do that. And there's people that will support that and provide the things that you need to do that.
Yeah. And I think as well, as you progress and you're on TRT or you're on steroids for a while, you think, I'm not dying. I feel pretty good. I'm looking better. I'm feeling better. Well, I'm going to feel even better if I get bigger and if I take this more. And it doesn't actually work like that. That's the thing. It's like if you optimize your levels of testosterone through TRT, you'll feel great. If you start overusing it, you'll start feeling like when you said you had acne and stuff, that's a huge sign, that you're taking too much. And then if you start stacking other compounds on top of that, that's when you start getting heart problems. And
that's what happened to me. Like that's literally what you're saying. Like my moment of like where I was like, holy shit, I need to stop this. I took a bunch of Winstrol tablets. Right? No, I know it's crazy. It's crazy. When I think of the stuff, the risks that I was taking at the time, it's insane, right? I remember taking a Winstrol tab and I'm laying in bed and I could feel my heart beating through my chest. Like I could hear it. And I was like, holy shit, I'm like 32 years old. I'm going to have a heart attack right now. And that like freaked me out.
But that happens.
What's that?
That happens. Those,
Yeah, it does.
I've got people that I know that were taking all sorts of stuff in the bodybuilding world, and they're in their 30s, had heart attacks, had like, you know, all sorts of flutters and problems, and they're just they've messed their lives up before they even start.
These risks that you will start accepting, like, you know, one of the things I did is I would put the steroids in my butt like that. You know, that's kind of how you do it, right? Well, I had a guy one time put it in my arm. We're like, let's try it in my bicep and see what happens. Then we tried it in my chest one time, and it's like squirting back out, and you're like, the fuck am I doing right now? You know, you're like taking these like crazy risks that you would never have taken before, you know. And I think that, you know, it
becomes the norm, doesn't it? It becomes the norm. I always think of it like a death slide or something. You know, when you first go on a death slide and you're looking down, you think, oh, it's big. You go down it and you think, oh, that's not too bad. And then you keep going through it, and then you would go on a bigger death slide. That's all it is. You're just willing. Then you know you're not going to die. You know you're not going to die instantly. It slowly kills you. It slowly gives you problems, and then before you know it, it's too late to actually turn back. And I think as we are growing, it does need to go clean, because like Paul said earlier, like people are feeling now that they have to do steroids at the top of the game to keep up, especially in the bigger divisions. Like the smaller guys, you know, they're still taking it, but they probably don't feel like they have to get that big. But if you're around that 100-kilo mark, it's a weird place to be at the moment, because some of those guys are massive. So it's like, even if you look at like Nicky Rod, if Nicky Rod is natural like he says he is, and he's fighting Victor Hugo, you know, he could make up that weight gap if he went on steroids. And fair play to him that he doesn't do that. Because, you know, we went out B-team. I genuinely don't think Nicky's on steroids, because he's not got that puffiness. He's in really good shape, and he does genuinely look after himself. So you look at that. But, you know, if he had a different personality maybe, or he really wanted to push himself to beat someone like Victor, if Victor would become the top guy, for example, you know, it's like he's going to have to take steroids to get that big and to maybe beat Victor.
Yeah, and it's just kind of set up that way now. Like until like there's, you know, like drug testing or something to change it, you know, it's going to always stay that way. You know, you kind of see it in MMA. It doesn't even matter that there's drug testing or whatever. There's, you know, people are still going to do it.
Mate, it's simple. As long as I think if CJI and ADCC, if they started drug testing now, and they come out and they said that they're going to start drug testing their athletes, it would stop a lot of it straight away, because of the two main competitions.
Stop a lot of the jiu-jitsu as well, though, mate. That's a problem, wouldn't it?
I don't think so. I think if they
compete, though.
Well, this is it, yeah.
But if they don't give them enough time,
they need to give people like maybe 2 or 3 years.
Give them a year to get their bodies back in check, and they'll be all right.
You see all these skinny dudes coming in now; they're all tiny and flabby and shit, dude.
But you say that, though, but like you'd see like, so, or you'd then straight away though know who was natty, like, and who's not. Like you'd have like Roberto Jimenez coming through being the main guy because he's so natural, and he bangs on about how natural he is, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think with the steroids though as well, it's not always about that performance in competition. I think it's the ability to acquire skill through the volume of training.
Exactly. Recovery.
Yeah.
Recovery, we're talking about that.
Yeah.
The recovery, definitely. Like when I was, you know, messing around with like steroids, which again is different than TRT, but when I was messing with that, like there was definitely like a big difference in my recovery and how much stronger I was, and just all of that. So, you know, those guys, they heal like a Wolverine does, you know. It's like, it's not normal.
Well, you can also take specific compounds to help recovery. You know, there's so many different compounds you can take. These top guys who've got a bit of money, they know what they're doing, and their doctors even, or whoever they're getting it off, knows what they're doing. So they can take specific compounds to aid recovery, which again, if you're training hours and hours a day on the mats, that's like a cheat code, isn't it? If Nicky Rod can train 2.5 hours a day, and that's the maximum he can train without breaking his body, but then someone else who's taking steroids can train 6 hours a day, you're always going to beat the guy that's only able to train 2.5 hours, because it's a technique game. It's a fact.
You know, yeah. I mean, I don't know how you stop that, you know.
Well, yeah. So the only way they stop it is by the top competitions coming in and making it illegal and actually drug testing them.
But what would be the benefit for them to do that?
Probably just the future generations of the sport, really. You know, you got children coming through that jiu-jitsu is getting more popular. Like what is, you know, my son's 13. What am I going to say to him? Say you got good enough to become a professional jiu-jitsu athlete. You know, am I going to encourage him if he was on the precipice of being one of the best to take steroids? I would say no. So then he's like going to limit himself because he's not, not taking steroids. And then it's like the long term, you look at Gordon, like, he talks about his health problems and that, but you can't turn around and say they're not related to him taking steroids. I'm not saying it's all about him taking steroids. I know he's had his stomach problems and this and that, but realistically, he doesn't look healthy, does he? Doesn't look like,
Probably doesn't
Gordon,
help.
No, yeah, you look at but you look at Gordon at 26, you look at him at 30. He looks like he's aged 10 years and 4, and it's just the fact of taking anabolic steroids.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate too, because you're going to see, like you said, with kids, like it's probably already happening where, teenagers start taking steroids and to compete in jiu-jitsu. It's already starting to happen. So, there'd have to be like a massive shift in the sport. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if these big companies that, have even are interested in doing that at all.
Yeah, but I guess it's like any other sport. I think when it eventually goes a bit more mainstream and a bit more money put into it, the general public wouldn't accept steroids. I don't think that's the problem, isn't it? It's like,
maybe, I don't know. They sure do in like other sports. Like look at the NFL in the U.S. Like those guys are massive, and nobody, no one's like, oh no, he's too big or he's too massive. I think that I think they would probably, the bigger the better. They're going to be more into it, I guess. I don't know. I like seeing the smaller grapplers anyhow, but it always seems like in every sport, people like the bigger guys. You see it in boxing, you see it everywhere. People want to see the heavyweights.
Yeah.
I think the general public probably wouldn't be aware of the health implications with taking steroids as well. I think they just see the end result, don't they, which they probably quite enjoy watching. So yeah, who knows? But you're such a young sport. I think it's gonna evolve, and we may see it go cleaner at some point. Just in regard to the weight room, Mike, as well, is that something that's changed for you over the years? Like we both, are big advocates of strength training and resistance training for, anything really, but specifically jiu-jitsu. I think I've heard you talk about this as well. But obviously there is there's a triage to be done, isn't there, in regard to what's important? So, how much am I doing jiu-jitsu and learning skill? How much am I lifting weights? How much am I doing yoga and stretching? Is that is that balance of strength training or yoga versus skill training, has that changed at all over the years for you?
Yeah, like I've always been into weight training. Like I've always just really liked lifting. Like ever since I was a teenager, I've always liked lifting weights. I think it's important too. I think it builds the armor on your body. Like you need that thickness. When I was a lot lighter a few years ago, like I was vegan a few years ago. I was like so light. I know, dude. I don't know what I was thinking, honestly. Like, I think it's okay. I mean, listen, nothing against being vegan. If people are into it and it's helping them and it's a good thing for them. For me, it was not a great experience. I feel like I got way more injured being vegan than I ever did going back to eating meat again. So in terms of my diet, like, making sure that I have good lean protein in my diet, and you just can't get it from vegetables. So, having that was important, and having that for my strength training as well. Like our body loses muscle mass as we age. So like having strength training is really, really important. I even tell the guys on my site, like that is one of the most important parts of the equation, is having some sort of weight training at least 3 days a week. But with that too, making sure you're not getting any overuse injuries too. Like, golf elbow, tennis elbow is pretty common for older guys. So you got to make sure that your joints are feeling good too. But I do think the strength training is going to build the armor for your grappling.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned obviously about being a vegan there. Obviously nutrition plays a key role as well. And I think certainly as you get older, you start developing more of an anabolic resistance in the body. And certainly sort of, the branch chain amino acids, like leucine, for example, is really important to trigger like the ability to sort of gain and repair muscle. So I think, whether it's vegan or not, or sort of carnivore or eating meat or not, I think getting sort of complete adequate protein is really key. And I think that's something that some people are really bad at. Yeah,
I agree. And, you got to make sure your diet's right. Like you just can't, you're not going to have a great experience on the mat if you're eating like shit. You can't out exercise a crappy diet, and you can't out jiu-jitsu a crappy diet. It's going to affect the way that you roll. It's going to affect the way that you train. It's going to affect the way that you recover from your training. So like I've eliminated pretty much as much sugar as I possibly can from my diet. Like I don't have any added sugar. I eat a lot of low glycemic type foods. I'm very mindful of the sugar consumption. That alone has helped me with more than anything with inflammation. Like I don't feel sore like I used to. You know, I feel like now, even now, like if I have a day where I do have a little bit of sugar, I feel like I pay for it the next day and my joints start to hurt. So, you know, doing all the things right with your diet is just really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome, mate. And one thing as well that is quite prevalent with people in their 40s and guys, but is obviously the amount of other shit you've got going on. So you come on the mats and you've got kids at home, you've got a busy job, you've got responsibilities. And you were very kind enough to share the online course that you've got available through X-Martial, which I had a look at, which I thought was really good. But you've obviously created a 4-step formula for coaching, which I thought was quite interesting because it does simplify, you know, how you can learn. So talk us through that. And I think you mentioned the cognitive load theory, which I thought was quite interesting as well. So tell us a little bit about that, because I thought that was quite good.
Yeah. So when I wrote a book, my wife and I wrote a book together. It's called the BJJ After 40 Survival Guide. We put that out last year. When I was doing research for the book, I came across this Dr. John Sweller. And Dr. John Sweller is the guy that came up with cognitive load theory. And so basically, he was a teacher, and he noticed, like with math students, why were some students picking up the formulas or the math, what they were learning, and some people were not picking it up. It is kind of like the same thing that I always thought about with jiu-jitsu. I'm like, why do I teach a class and everybody sees the move, but then there's like 1 or 2 people that walk away from the class and they just got the move down, but not everybody in the class. The same thing with seminars. What's the joke with seminars? Like you leave the seminar and it's like that movie Men in Black where they put the wand up to your head and you forget everything. Yeah. Right? As a practitioner, I don't want to go to a seminar and feel like I'm forgetting everything, but also as a teacher, I don't want to feel like I'm spinning my wheels showing a move and like one person's going to get the base of the move. So that always to me was like kind of a problem in jiu-jitsu. So cognitive load theory is very interesting. So what Dr. John Sweller came up with was that our brain, our working memory, can handle about 4 bits of information at a time. It's actually 4 to 7, but the average is about 4. So think of like a phone number. It's 7 digits, right? So you teach a move in a class. You come to a normal jiu-jitsu class. The instructor gets up there. Everybody crowds around him. He shows a move. He talks for 5 or 10 minutes, says all this kind of stuff. 1, 2, 3, clap, and everybody goes off and they practice the move. What I noticed as an instructor was immediately that everybody does the same things wrong. So I got to get to everybody as quick as I can before they start doing the wrong shit, right? Like if you teach someone a move, almost everybody does exactly the same thing wrong, right? So with cognitive load theory, 4 bits of information, what's going to affect those 4 bits of information, right? The first is called intrinsic load. So think about like, if you came to my class right now, let's imagine you guys were both white belts and I was going to teach the armbar from the mount. Your intrinsic load, what you know about the armbar is probably very minimal. In fact, it might even be wrong. It could be minimal. It could be nothing. It could be a little bit of something. It could be totally wrong. So what you know about that technique already is going to affect how you learn that technique. Does that make sense? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The instructor carries what's called the extraneous load. This is what Dr. John Sweller came up with. And it relates directly to jiu-jitsu. So the extraneous load is how he teaches that technique. So if I'm up in front of the class and I rant on for 10 minutes and I'm talking about angles and all this crazy shit, you too, as a brand new white belt, when you get back to your partner, I just added a ton more to your load now, an extraneous load, too much stuff. You get back to now, you're like, holy shit, I can't remember anything. Why is that happening? Well, because it's affected by what you already know and how the instructor presents the information. Then the last part of it is called the germane load. And think of germane like germinate. How does a seed germinate after it's in the ground? After you've learned the technique, what are going to be the things that you're going to go do now to like make sure that you know the technique, and how are you going to drill the technique? How are you going to practice the technique? So what we found was that there's 4 steps to every technique. Right? That's your 4 bits of information. So grip, control, trap, submit. Those are my 4 steps. If I can find, when I teach a move, if I can isolate the 4 steps to every technique, and as you as a new white belt, I can show you the first 4 basic parts of that technique. You know exactly now when you go practice with your partner exactly what you're going to be doing, versus like this massive load of information. You don't even know where to start from. You don't even know what the first move is, let alone the second, third, and fourth move. You're never going to figure out the move. If you're over 40 or 50, it even gets worse. It's too much information. Guys and girls my age, people that are in their 40s and 50s, like simplicity. They like to keep it super simple, super easy. So with the 4 steps, we can isolate how to do the technique exactly right. That's going to allow them later on cognitive rehearsal. When they get home, they can go back and go, oh, armbar from the mount. I remember it now. The first move was the grip. I grabbed the arm. The second move was I turned my hips and got control. The third move, I stepped over the head, and so forth. So they know exactly what their 4 steps are going to be, and they can practice and learn things a lot quicker that way. The other advantage with it is when they get back to their partner in the classroom, with this big bundle of information that doesn't isolate the 4 steps, there's a lot higher chance that they're going to get injured doing the move. They're not going to know where exactly the leverage is being applied. They're not going to know exactly how to do the move the right way. So there's a lot higher chance that they either injure themselves or their partner doing the move. So that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. That's really good. I thought I've not been through all of the different techniques. There's a ton on there, but I thought how simply you put it, I thought was great. If people want to pick that up, where can they buy that from? So
the way that the program works, it's got 20 instructional videos in it where I break down specific techniques, different techniques using the 4-step formula. It also comes with a training manual that breaks it down in terms of how do you apply this as an individual. So how do I take the moves that are in the video and apply those 4 steps, but how do I find those 4 steps in everything that I already know? So every single move is going to have 4 steps within it. So it teaches you how to do that, but also like as a coach, how do I coach people using the 4-step formula as well? And it can be picked up through X Marshall. They have it on their website, and yeah, it's really great stuff. I think people are going to find a lot of value in it.
Yeah, awesome, Mike. And if people want to jump onto your community, is it just BJJ After 40 pretty much on all platforms?
Yeah, all the platforms, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, the whole shebang. Yeah, BJJ After 40.
Awesome, Mike. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for the conversation, mate. Hopefully there's lots of good information there for our 40-year-old audience. Awesome, man. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.